Do horoscopes work? You know they don't. But can we prove it? Scientists did, several times actually. There were numerous successful attempts by the scientific community to put an end to this argument. That's right, numerous. But can we really call any of them successful? Carl Sagan himself famously declined to sign the anti-astrology statement already signed by 186 astronomers, physicists, and leading scientists of the day. Well, how come? That's why I'm kinda curious about the mechanics of astrology. And this is a little bit awkward, but there's really no way around it. Astronomy kinda owes astrology. Big time.
You believe in astrology?
A little bit,
And what makes you say that?
because I can see the stars.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine.
Astronomy and astrology were once the same discipline. Long before writing was a thing, people already noticed how reliable and predictable the heavens were. It was something to be sure of, something you could take to the prehistoric bank. Generations gazed into the glimmering abyss wondering. And it paid off. The sky turned into a calendar, a compass, and a clock to the early hunter-gatherers. Knowing something ahead of time is pretty empowering. Astronomy might very well be the oldest science in human history, and astrology proudly stood by it as its faithful spouse for centuries. When did this star couple get a divorce? How did it happen? And why? In the 18th century, a very symbolic moment took place. The observatories stopped employing astrologers. This administrative divorce reflects a profound intellectual rift. Educated guesses not based on consistently proven scientific data did not sit well with actual research and empirical proof. If only there were a way to predict all this. Astrology app market alone is enormous. It has the potential of reaching 11 to 12 billion by 2030 if current growth rates continue. Their revenue comes from subscriptions, premium birth charts analysis, compatibility reports, live consultations, and AI-generated readings. But let's set the scene first and start from the beginning. Around 1000 BC, Babylonians went professional. Cataloging stars, tracking planetary motions, they kept records spanning centuries. They could even successfully predict eclipses. Many modern constellation names ultimately descend from Babylonian traditions.
Babylonians made all this up.
So kinda like LLMs with great pattern recognition and data processing. Not so great at coming up with original ideas explaining the underlying mechanics. Still, not gonna knock the civilization that gave us five-legged lions with hairdos this awesome. Babylonians were mostly driven by a firm belief the heavens sent messages from the gods. Mars appears unusually bright. This might mean war. The eclipse is warning us of the king being in danger. Basically, in an effort to predict better, astrology sort of pushed people to become better astronomers. For years, critics attacked astrology on philosophical grounds and questioned its logic and results. Instead of joining the argument and diving into its rationale, scientists offered, how about we simply test whether astrologers can actually do what they claim? All astrology needs is to produce predictions that are better than random chance. Let's just set all the energy and vibrations aside for a moment and focus on the outcome. As far as golden standards go, this is the one for astrology. It was published in 1985 in one of the world's most prestigious scientific journals, Nature. The best thing about it was that actual professional astrologers were involved in designing the experiment, so nobody could later say, yeah, but you see, you did it wrong. Each of the volunteering participants provided professional astrologers their accurate birth date, birth time, and location to create full natal charts. Then, each participant received 3 envelopes. One contained a personality profile that actually belonged to them. The other 2 were equally plausible profiles belonging to other people. They had just one job: pick the one that matches you. Astrology claims your birth chart describes your personality, strengths, weaknesses, relationships. Choosing the correct profile could not have been easier then. And it was, for about 1/3 of the participants.
How do you know?
Just a lucky guess.
But those were randos, they didn't know what they were doing. You see, only the professional astrologer can navigate the elusive task of picking the right one out of 3 charts. You need the perfect blend of knowledge and experience to nail this one down. Professional astrologers received the same birth charts and, to make it fair, target psychological profiles. Their task was the same, and again, their accuracy was just as good as random guessing. Some astrologers claimed the atmosphere was wrong because apparently astrology doesn't really work under laboratory conditions. Which doesn't really make a good case for astrology, but to make things even worse, some went on to say that the volunteers weren't spiritual enough. As if there were a reliable, repeatable way to measure one's spirituality. Now I don't know about you guys, but I'd measure it in midichlorians. Obviously, Sean Carlson's paper was criticized. An article questioning his approach to statistics was published in Correlation, an English astrology journal. And, to be fair, the methodology is not perfect. Carlson's statistical approach may not have been the only reasonable way to analyze the data. But that's not the biggest issue. Suppose Carlson really made a statistical mistake. But it's been 40 years. Can another group come up with different results? Independent replications have not established that astrologers can reliably match charts to personality profiles above chance. The scientific consensus on Carlson's experiment remains unchanged. Classic diversion tactic. Instead of challenging the premise, you go, yeah, your test sucks and you're stupid, go finish studying physics. Since Carson's study, numerous controlled experiments have asked astrologers to identify professions, predict marriages, identify personality traits, and match twins. But let's take a closer look at some of astrology's main principles and try to give them a fair shake, because the majority of scientists just refuse to do it. I'm not here to blame them, I just want to do this so they don't have to.
That the moment you look under the bonnet in astrology, you're going to find that it's just nothing, it doesn't stand up to science, and that's wrong.
Really? Just plain wrong? All of it? Okay, here goes. Let's see. All you need is date, time, and place of birth. Thanks to modern astronomy, knowing this is enough to determine where the sun, the moon, and each of the planets were. Which part of the sky was rising, which stars were overhead. This part is 100% legitimate astronomy. Probably the only thing our two spouses have in common. The very next step diverges hard. Now it swerves. The sky is divided into 12 equal sectors of 30 degrees each. Inside those sectors, constellations, or as they call them, zodiac signs. However, the actual constellations are nowhere near equal. For example, Virgo spans roughly 44 degrees while Scorpius spans only about 7.
Babylonians made all this up.
Ophiuchus sits between Scorpio and Sagittarius. Astrology chooses to ignore all this, using 12 perfectly equal slices. Why? It makes for easier calculations. And looks cooler, duh. After all, sciences are best known for picking the easy route and choosing symbolism over precision. Or is it the other way around? Ancient Greeks looked into planets long before natal charts were a thing. Greek observers quickly noticed that most stars looked fixed in place and formed patterns, while some stars were wandering. The Greeks called them planetes, which translates to wanderers, slowly moving across the stellar background. Those were Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Nobody knew why they were moving. Some don't to this day. Even more astonishingly, Aristotle also noticed that the Earth's shadow on the moon is always circular. And as we all know, only a sphere casts a circular shadow from every direction. Aristotle and later Claudius Ptolemy gave astronomy its mathematical foundation. Ptolemy wrote 2 enormously influential books, the Almagest that explained how the heavens moved, Edith Newton, and the Tetrabiblius, which explained what the heavens meant. Okay, I'll eat it. I deserve it. While the first book dealt with star catalogs, planetary models, and mathematical tables, the second was about horoscopes, personalities, destinies, and entire kingdoms. For over 1,000 years, the inseparable duo of astronomy and astrology worked as a blueprint for those who tried to predict celestial events and those who interpreted them. Ptolemy asked, how does it all work? And then went on to ask, is Jupiter gaslighting me? Get it? Because Jupiter is a gas giant? Ptolemy had no way of knowing what it was. Never mind. One of the oldest scientific explanations for astrology is the claim that planets exert physical forces on us. Do they? Physical? Well then, physics to the rescue. The gravitational pull of Mercury, the closest planet to Earth on a newborn, is orders of magnitude weaker than that of the objects surrounding him or her. Our neighboring planets also emit electromagnetic fields at Earth's surface that can hardly compare with countless local sources. In other words, it's less than negligible. And that concludes the list of traditional energies involved. Those forces are far too small to account for, well, anything. Finally, after thousands of years of tireless efforts, we can safely say that Mercury is not angry with us. Sometimes it's just leisurely passing us in planetary traffic, giving zero, and if you find yourself freaking out about it, it's definitely a sign. This brings us to Dr. Carl Sagan. Lawrence E. Jerome partnered with astronomer Bart J. Bach and philosopher Paul Kurtz to publish a statement on astrology. Concerned with renewed public interest in the subject, they stated that there is no scientific foundation for the tenets of astrology and ushered a warning against accepting astrological advice. Carl Sagan said that although the statement had a point, it was authoritarian and controversial in nature. Sagan argued that he would willingly sign such a statement had it described and refuted the principal tenets of astrological belief. This goes to show how well Dr. Sagan understood public relations. Scientists get irritated when discussing astrology, and understandably so, but this irritation promotes contempt, and as we all know, being condescending is the go-to move in diplomacy. But it's really hard to stay calm when you know how nonchalantly astrology accepted Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. Even religious dogmas have a harder time adjusting to modern times. What? New planets? Whatever, put them on, take them out, who cares? Aha, but you see, planets actually integrate into birth charts too. They split the sky, yes, again, into 12 sectors, except nobody agrees how. And those pesky astronomers, they threw 3 more planets into the mix, and then they excluded one. Didn't you guys want to know more about the stars and the planets and such? There are dozens of house systems, and sometimes it only depends on the kind of software you're using.
Computer says no.
And just like planets, the sun itself can jump from one house to the other, from 9th to 10th, altering your entire destiny. Astronomer Phil Plait noted that the sun dominates the solar system in terms of electromagnetism. I'd also humbly add that the entire solar system is dominated by the sun in almost every aspect, especially its gravitational pull. For Pete's sake, it's a freaking star, it's massive, and all life depends on it. In astrology, astro means star. And Sun is the only star we can see up close at a safe distance. New data is being published on it constantly. Why aren't the astrologers obsessing more about the Sun is anyone's guess. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a little bit bitter about the way they're treating my favorite star. It's not just another planet. Yeah, but... Each of the planets is carrying some sort of symbolic meaning. Say Mars is associated with aggression, drive, and competition, so hot-tempered or hot. Tough call for a planet with mean surface temperature of minus 60 Celsius, but whatever, it's red. Red means hot. Speaking of hot, Venus is all about love, beauty, and harmony. What we're talking about here is a planet with average surface temperature of harmonious 467 degrees, comfy pressure of 92 standard atmospheres, and some violent volcanic activity. I say we ask Venus why Steve is so bad at commitment. Ares, the OG god of war? Yeah, he's also there. Go ahead, see for yourself, it's all very scientific. It reminds me of a character named Benny from an old Brendan Fraser movie, The Mummy, where he carried all kinds of religious symbols on his neck, because you never know. This personality trait of yours, it comes from Mars. Or, hear me out, childhood. To complicate things further, planets can be modified by signs. Mars in Aries, yes, it's a thing. Mars in Cancer and Mars in Libra, they're not all equal. Why? Well, if you're looking for a quantifiable empirical evidence, there is none. But there's kind of a logic behind it. Fire signs give Mars a boost. Water signs mellow it out. And speaking of hot and fiery, remember this? I bet a ball of plasma a million miles in diameter can deal with some water.
Shut up about the sun! Shut up about the sun!
The planets had a meeting and decided 100 Kevins should pursue marketing. Pah! 100 Kevins is nothing. We needed way more data for a clear pattern to emerge. A certain Michel Gauquelin agreed. He went all in. Gauquelin actually wanted to prove astrology worked. That's exactly why he left nothing to chance, spending decades collecting over 100,000 birth records, which is way more than any astrologer analyzes over their entire career.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
What he found was nothing. The signs failed him. Aries did not produce more soldiers, Geminis weren't more communicative, Virgos weren't more meticulous, zodiac signs showed zero predictive power. So, case closed. Except a pattern did emerge. There was a faint uptick in certain successful athletes being born while Mars occupied a particular part of the sky. Finally, some scientific proof. This discovery was named and celebrated as the Mars effect. But then, it turned out that the Mars effect did not fit astrology, like, at all. It actually contradicted it. An isolated statistical correlation that had nothing to do with zodiac signs, houses, or any personality readings. To this very day, researchers keep arguing over whether the Mars effect reflects subtle flaws in sampling approach, demographic effects, or maybe just a genuine anomaly. But whatever its explanation, it's hardly evidence that horoscopes work. And a French group named CFEPP replicated the study, finding out that the discovered difference was not statistically convincing under the agreed analysis. So depending on your approach and your thoroughness, there might be no effect at all. This is exactly why I feel that scientists are being way too pragmatic with the whole subject. They're going after results, which is absolutely logical and reasonable. But the thing is, you can always poke holes in someone else's methodology, especially when it comes to statistics, because it's a very tricky subject and it depends on your point of view heavily. This is why I believe that going after astrology's mechanics makes more sense. It's just more fun. Aspects. According to astrology, planets, stars, and constellations interact with each other through angles. Those angles, they're technically real. For example, 0 degrees is conjunction, 180 is opposition, 90 is square, and 120 is trine, and 60 is sextile, like a sexy textile. And this is where math dies. These interactions are described as square is tension or trine is harmony, but nobody discovered these through controlled observation. It's pure mysticism. What astrologers call square is kind of amusing too. 87, 93, 95, 86, all squares. Well, depending on which astrologer you ask. These tolerances or orbs are left to personal judgment rather than any universal rule. Medieval astronomers measured the heavens to within an arc minute. Modern astrology uses the close enough approach. Science! Start with math and with fanfiction. Shh, nobody tell them the Earth's axis slowly precesses over 26,000 years. Psh, who am I kidding? They won't care. Weight also matters. When it comes to astrology, weight is how they solve another issue. No, silly, not mass. Let's say Mars squares Sun while Saturn trine Venus and paper covers rock. I mean, Moon conjunct Jupiter. So which one dominates? Thankfully, there's a clear, agreed upon formula. Oh, wait.
This does not hurt a rock. This help a rock, okay?
Different astrologers emphasize different features. Some prioritize sun-moon ascendant, others house ruler, chart rulers, stellimus, dignity, and dispositors. Reading this, I feel like I'm dispositing of my dignity. If I were an astrologer, I'd use all of them and just pick the one where the outcome is best. So a skilled astrologer is like a master storyteller. They're experts of weaving symbols into a neat, meaningful braid of a story. Almost every placement has an opposite interpretation available. Saturn in 7th can mean late marriage, serious commitment, mature relationships, and fear of intimacy. All from the same symbol. That's some impressive flexibility. And speaking of flexibility, another famous experiment cleverly exploited what is now called the Barnum effect. Psychologist Bertram Forer gave every student of his a personality profile containing statements like, "You sometimes doubt you've made the right decision," and "You have considerable unused potential." You can already tell where this is going, right? Due to their vagueness and universal applicability, the students found the descriptions they were given extremely accurate. 4.3 out of 5 actually. Now that's incredible. Except they were all given the same profile. Forer just pieced it together from the newspaper's astrology column. But each new failed astrology experiment is just another retrograde, right? Funny how smart, educated people can call vague pointers extremely accurate and fail to see the obvious contradiction. The way horoscopes work is pretty simple. They all contain generally positive, slightly vague, universally applicable descriptions like, "You sometimes enjoy being alone." Who doesn't? You can be critical of yourself. Well, everyone is. Well, almost. Our brain just can't help but naturally fill in the specifics. Then suddenly, it becomes accurate. And then ages like milk. The Milky Way fascinated people for centuries. We imagined it as a heavenly river, souls traveling, a road for gods. That's until 1609, when Galileo Galilei pointed a telescope at it. The glowing band dissolved into thousands upon thousands of individual stars. His telescope also revealed mountains on the moon, sunspots, moons orbiting Jupiter, and phases of Venus. When abiding by laws of physics, the sky seemed less and less of a divine realm. The stars turned out to be other suns, each racing through the galaxy at hundreds of kilometers per second, not attached to anything, scattered across incomprehensible distances. So a child born in Babylon, Rome, or medieval Europe looked up at almost exactly the same constellations we see today. Even over 1,000 years, its unfathomable scale makes its motion almost entirely imperceptible. 60 years after Kepler published his Rudolphine tables, Sir Isaac Newton put the final nail in the spiritual argument's coffin by publishing the Principia. For the first time, gravity explained planetary motion. Astronomy finally acquired a mechanism. Astrology has one too. You see...
How could it possibly work?
Yes.
And I've told you, I don't know.
Oh, okay. For centuries, two disciplines gained the record of having very different standards of evidence, moving them further and further apart, like celestial bodies. Poetic. Johannes Kepler famously disliked astrology, calling it the foolish daughter of astronomy, despite the fact that astrology earned much of his income, and the fact that the relation itself can be disputed. Kepler would be happy to know that by the late 19th century, astrology largely left universities and scientific institutions, while astronomy became a quantitative physical science taking to the stars. But the stars influence our personality. This fares even worse than planets. Light takes 8 minutes to get to Earth, and 5.5 hours to reach Pluto. 5.5 hours at the speed of light. And that's within the solar system. That means that by the time you see sunlight from the surface of Pluto, it's already 5 hours old. That's our star, the one that actually influences us like nothing else can. The object that life depends on. Pretty influential. Excluding the Sun, the closest one is Proxima Centauri. It's in the name, Proxima. By space standards, it's in the neighborhood, 4.25 light years away. If it blows up right now, it'll take us 4.5 years to catch up to the fact. And most stars we see are way further away. So that means we're constantly a little behind on the state of the affairs. The star we're looking at right now could be exploding this very moment and we'll never know. Well, our progeny will. The Milky Way alone contains hundreds of billions of stars, and those of them who compile 12 constellations are responsible for human resources.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
We should be thankful there is no meaningful physical connection between us and the stars. Because you might think that Eta Carinae is deciding your fate while it's been gone for 7,500 years. The Andromeda Galaxy is 2.5 million light years away. The photons entering your eyes left Andromeda long before Neanderthal was a thing. Hell, even our own galaxy's center is 25,000 years away. The stars were burning for eons at tens of millions of degrees just so that Susan can explain why she's bad at texting back. However, astrology endures, very much so. One of the main reasons to that is practical. Astronomy can't help you with answers about love, health, children, and luck. It can't give you career advice, but it can be a career. And it definitely can't tell your future. Astrology claims it can. It survived Copernicus, Galileo, Newton, relativity, and quantum mechanics. It's like floppies would still be commonplace. Except floppies were actually useful. After all, famous intellectuals like Carl Jung and Ronald Reagan were famously into astrology. Except that Jung never argued that planetary movement physically caused human behavior. He had this idea that astrology might reflect meaningful symbolic correspondences, what he called synchronicity, between events in the psyche and events in the heavens. For what it's worth, Jung considered it worth studying. Could have been an elegant and surprising explanation to its resilience. However, Jung never produced any evidence to convince the broader scientific community, probably because it would be too difficult to evaluate. There is no way to generate clear, falsifiable predictions. Without specific testable expectations, it remains outside the scope of empirical confirmation or refutation. As for the face of Reaganomics, an actor turning politician, he ain't no scientist. So if the chart truly encodes measurable information about personality or life events, then different astrologers should tend to reach similar conclusions from the same chart. And those conclusions should predict outcomes better than chance, right? Well, they don't. The absence of accuracy doesn't prove every interpretation is meaningless, but it does weigh against the claim that birth charts objectively predict personality or destiny. It starts with precise celestial mechanics and immediately ditches it for lore. Speaking of lore, tropical versus sidereal is yet another internal disagreement among astrologers. Neither has been shown empirically to outperform the other. That alone should raise your eyebrows. But the fact that the whole shebang starts with precise celestial mechanics is enough to legitimize it in a lot of people's eyes. I blame the education system and the attention span. And as for all the experiments, being 1/3 correct is a chance a lot of people are willing to take. To anyone who didn't flunk school, hearing "it's no better than random chance" should immediately translate to "it definitely doesn't." But a bunch of people unfortunately hear "sometimes it's correct." Tropical astrology, sidereal astrology, equal houses, Placidus, because reality is best known for accommodating everyone's preferences. So, the moment of birth determines your life. It must be so reassuring for people born during daylight saving transitions and leap years. But why birth specifically? That's not the moment your existence starts. How about your first heartbeat? Shouldn't that be crucial? So far, astrology never produced a compelling physical or biological reason why the instant of birth should be uniquely significant. In my opinion, the best proof that horoscopes don't work is that insurance companies ignore them. Personally, I'd prefer if people would treat them for what they are. A fun pastime, a silly game not to be taken seriously. One thing can be said for certain, that it is a business. And a much bigger one than most people realize. First challenge lies in the fact that there is no single astrology industry classification. Much like astrologers themselves, market researchers draw the boundary differently. Recent estimates put the global astrology market at roughly 13 to 14 billion annually in 2025, about the size of the global fountain pen market, with forecasts of 18 to 21 billion in the early 2030s. Yep, growth. It's much smaller than cosmetics or pharmaceuticals, but far from insignificant. I'm not gonna point any fingers at a specific nation that contributes the most, but yeah, it's India. Come on guys, your nation contributed so much to science. Online scams are embarrassing enough. Consumer astronomy market pales in comparison. Roughly 1 billion per year, growing around 3 to 8% annually, driven by amateur astronomy, astrophotography, educational sales and smart telescopes like Vaonis and Unistellar. While actual scientific observatories are a completely different world. Only a handful are built each decade, so the market is extremely lumpy. But stars are small potatoes, mere dots in the sky. We need to think big. Constellations have intrinsic meaning, says astrology. While the International Astronomical Union only defined official constellation borders in 1930 for mapping purposes, and only from Earth's perspective. Astronomers even sometimes joke that constellations are accidental alignments. They are not actual groups of stars. The stars in a constellation are almost never physically close to each other. They only appear to form a pattern because you're viewing them from one particular point in space. Earth. The famous constellation Orion looks like a coherent figure in the sky, but its brightest stars are scattered across enormous distances. Bellatrix and Alnilam, 2 of the 6 stars that form Orion, are about 7 times farther from each other than Bellatrix is from us. Oh, and remember that bit about the Earth's axis wobbling? I'll let Dr. Nye explain this.
They say I am a Sagittarius. So on my birthday, you might expect the sun to rise in the constellation Sagittarius. And it did, 2,000 years ago, when the Babylonians made all this up. But it doesn't now. In the last 2,000 years, the Earth has wobbled like a top. So now on my birthday, the sun rises in Scorpio, not Sagittarius. So maybe you'd have to be a Capricorn to be a Sagittarius, and Scorpios would have to be Libras. See, astrologers are off 1 full sign. In 2,000 more years, they'll be off 2 signs. But they don't seem to care.
Or even better, imagine traveling 500 light years sideways. Orion would no longer resemble Orion. The belt would tear apart. Constellations exist only because of our viewing angle. In fact, they don't exist at all. So how does something that does not exist have any meaning, intrinsic or otherwise? Imagine a rhinoceros named Orion farting in the Great Plains of Africa.
Immense rhino fart.
That event has the same relative influence on your fate as actual Orion, light years away, being just as oblivious to your existence as its African counterpart. Historically, different civilizations saw completely different constellations. For example, Greeks saw Orion, Chinese Shen, Australian Aboriginal traditions refer to the emu in the sky, formed largely from large dust lanes rather than bright stars. The plain fact is that there is no objective cosmic boundary around constellations. Different cultures connected the same stars into completely different pictures. The Chinese developed their own astronomy almost entirely independent of Greece. They even recorded comets and supernovae. In 1054, Chinese astronomers observed a supernova. Today, we know it as the Crab Nebula, so yeah, way ahead of the curve. Europe remained ignorant to the fact that the stars can change for almost 6 more centuries. The appearance of a new star was considered impossible. Until Tycho Brahe observed one. And yes, the largest crater on the moon is named after him. Tycho also cast horoscopes for nobles, by the way. I had 0 issues with it. But why would he? A middle-aged university student studying astronomy would also often study astrology. Kings employed court astrologers, so did popes, nobility, and merchants. Some of them also employed jesters. Whatever, everyone regarded astrology as a respectable branch of astronomy. Doctors even timed bloodletting according to current planetary positions. In 1543, the year of his death, Nicholas Copernicus published his magnum opus, the De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium, on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres. This work systematically presented the heliocentric theory. Its ideas were initially heavily debated, and it took decades to gain broad acceptance. The notion that Earth was just another planet was a tough pill to swallow. The moon affects people. Now, this one is different. The moon does have actual measurable effects on us mere mortals. Events like tides, small deformations in Earth's crust, and directly affecting human physiology. Although lunar phases affect female health and thus sometimes their mood, linking them to crime, births, psychiatric admissions, or accidents have generally not held up in large, well-controlled studies. Some effects of moonlight on animals and possibly human sleep in certain settings remain active research topics, but these aren't the same as traditional astrological claims. In the 20th century, astrology got really lucky, because several bright minds got involved. Besides Jung, Parisian Daniel Chenevier, better known as Dane Rudyard, worked on reshaping 20th century astrology by integrating it with psychology, philosophy, and spiritual thought, particularly through his development of humanistic and later transpersonal astrology. His writings span philosophy, music, poetry, cultural criticism, and astrology. Rudyard argued that astrology should be understood less as a system for predicting external events and more as a symbolic language describing psychological development and life cycles. Influenced by the psychology of aforementioned Carl Jung, he interpreted the birth chart as an archetypal map of human potential rather than this deterministic blueprint. Over time, his thought evolved from humanistic astrology centered on personal growth toward transpersonal astrology, which emphasized spiritual development beyond the individual ego. Later in life, he focused on philosophical view of humanity and its role in ecology. A noble cause, but Wendy just wants a simple answer. I'm sorry, Daniel, but your complicated eco-philosophy? Yeah, that won't fly with the masses. To be fair to India, the US, for example, has a surprisingly large market too. The psychic service industry generated roughly $2.3 billion in 2024 alone. According to AP News, about 30% of Americans report engaging with astrology, tarot, or fortune-telling at least once a year. And to answer a burning question, only about 1% say they rely on it heavily for major life decisions. What a relief. Mercifully, this suggests that for the vast majority of consumers, astrology functions more like entertainment, self-reflection, or a wellness activity than a decision-making system. Research suggests higher engagement among millennials, Gen Z, women especially under 50, and LGBTQ+ communities. The reasons people typically give include curiosity, entertainment, identity exploration, anxiety reduction, and seeking meaning during uncertain times. These uncertain times is what concerns me greatly, because what if things get like really desperate? Stay rational, people, okay? From a business perspective, astrology has characteristics many tech startup founders would envy. Very low cost of goods sold, high customer retention due to daily horoscopes encouraging habitual use, strong recurring subscription potential, automated personalization, virtually no inventory, and all of this targets a global audience. Social network's quirky twin sister. Twins. Identical twins are born 1 minute apart in the same hospital and thus have nearly identical birth charts. So their fate should be very similar. Twins should provide for perfect research subjects. And as you all know, their personalities, careers, marriages, illnesses, and lifespans never diverge. What? Oh, right. Twin studies consistently find that astrological charts can't predict anything beyond what shared genetics and environments already do. Okay, enough of these mechanics. I bet you can see why scientists don't indulge them. But the apps are selling like hotcakes. The amount of personal information shared would make Zuck salivate profusely, and as per usual, it's all shared voluntarily. We kinda deserve all this, don't we? However, it bears repeating over and over and over again, people should not take astrology seriously, ever, in any circumstance. This is a hill I am willing to lay my hat on, because astrology is not going anywhere.
They don't seem to care.
This is exactly why this discussion should maintain. Let's all heed Neil's warning here.
And many Gen Zs now are checking their horoscopes weekly.
Yeah, we live in a free country, so I'm not going to try to stop them. What would be sad is if that number got to 100%, and then you wouldn't be generating scientists or engineers or people who the objective truths of the world matter. And then this civilization just goes back to the cave.
If this video is my only legacy, fine, I stand by it, except for the Indian joke. So what do you guys think? Reagan or Kepler? Sagan or this guy?